given the fact that we're talking about the state of the industry, I'd like to go down the line and let each of you talk a little bit about where you feel we're at relative to the cycle.
I think we're sort of towards the late, maybe even in the extra innings, to use a baseball analogy, because of course I've said that every year for the last 5 years. So I just don't see us going another 5 years. I see us leveling off a little bit maybe in 2020. I think 2019 will still be good.
Great.
Yeah, we are seeing the market's still very strong, right? The market's still very strong from a purchasing standpoint, from a developing standpoint, when you want to purchase land or buildings to readapt, etc. And also from an industry, from a design and construction standpoint, you can't find the resources. So today, right now, from a design and construction perspective, it's incredibly strong. Do we see it feathering off in a year or 2's time? Possibly, who knows?
Yeah, I think as Nick and Greg said, we're seeing a very solid market over the next couple of years. We've got a very strong pipeline at IHG over the next couple of years, but I think we're probably going to start seeing some corrections, especially coming into the 2020 election year. But then again, who really knows? I mean, we've, as Greg said, we've seen this growing forever. When is it actually going to start tailing off? Nobody knows. If we knew, we wouldn't be sitting here. We'd all be, cruising around in a yacht in the Caribbean. But I think the market is very strong. And, as Nick said, if you look at the design talent that's out there, it's very hard to find design talent. It's very hard to find contractors. A lot of the contractors that we use for our stick-built product are the same contractors that are building the multifamily, and they're super hard to find.
Yeah, we would agree. So we're an operating group, and when I get a phone call or a series of phone calls from a high net worth individual on a cell phone, right, who has just come from a closing of a property that they just bought, and they say, are you interested in managing this property? That kind of makes you feel like there's a bubble existing somewhere. It's just an odd feeling when people are buying hotels with capital that seems to be pretty easily accessible. I think the huge concern that we see is, STR and PKF and everyone's forecasting about a 2 to 2.5% ADR or RevPAR growth. The challenge with that is all the operating costs, right? So your labor costs are going up, your insurance costs are going up, your property tax is going up. And so if all those are going up and they're not necessarily a flexing type component, then that profitability is eaten away even though the top line is forecasted to grow. So as operators, that's a huge challenge for us. But I actually think the larger issue around everything, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, is labor, right? So in the bottom of the recession in 2007, there were 300,000 jobs that were available in the hospitality industry. Now there are 800,000 jobs available, right? So that is a huge delta, and at some point that is going to go sideways. It's just how soon, and that's one of our biggest challenges as an operator is talent, and I'm sure it's probably across the board as far as an opportunity or a challenge. But
well, several of you mentioned that is kind of it's a continuing challenge, whether it's on the design side or on the execution side. Can you elaborate a little bit on specifics there? Obviously, there's a shortage of folks out there to build these projects, but tell me about some specific challenges you're having.
Well, it's not just attracting talent, it's retaining it on the operations side, right? Because if you have someone who's really good, your competition sees that as well, and which has always been sort of my operating philosophy. You open a new hotel, go find the best talent at your competition, and you get 2 for 1, right? So you get the best talent in the industry, and you've hurt your competitor. But everybody does that. So that's difficult. And then also, as you said, with construction, just finding labor and consistent and timely, because every project gets stretched out because of the inability of lack of access to labor. Capital's not a problem. It's the people side of the equation.
Yeah, and I think the challenge that we're seeing is, as we're the brands that are developing all these new design innovations for our brands, we're finding a very difficult time with architecture, design, engineering talent, interior design. Because if you look at the market, for the A&E side of things, when the market dipped in 2008, you had a lot of individuals that left the market and went off into different fields. So what we find in the A&E side of the world is you've got quite a few individuals that have less than, say, 7 years experience, and then you have quite a few individuals who have more than 20 years experience, and you're trying to find that mid-range to go off and push these designs as fast as we can. So we're really struggling with talent there, and it starts there, and then it feeds into, you know, construction talent, so on and so forth. So it just begins to compound itself. That's been the biggest challenge that we've run into.
Two biggest challenges. Well, the challenges that we got is the same thing: design resources, and construction resources, which we've been talking about. From both a design standpoint and from a construction standpoint, the way we're trying to get around it is developing long-term strategies. Mm-hmm. So if you go to, we go to, you know, large design companies, smaller design companies, develop a long-term strategy with these folks so we can keep the teams, in theory, keep the teams consistent for our development of our products. So the teams, they understand our product. We get to know each other from a personal standpoint. They understand us, we understand them, they understand how we both tick. And the production theoretically gets quicker and quicker and quicker. And for us, speed to market is absolutely critical. So if we can replicate the teams, or at least the intelligence within the teams and the know-how within the teams to different markets, to different projects, we can compress our design schedules. Same from a construction standpoint. We like to develop long-term strategies with our contractors. So our contractors can then, learn our product, we can learn them, get to know each other and be more efficient when it comes to building our hotels. So when you're building our hotels, developing these long-term strategies theoretically compresses the construction schedule, which has to be to the benefit of everybody.
Yeah, and we're doing some very similar things to that. The challenge that we run into is when we're competing against all the other brands that are in the market, and there's so many brands that are out there, it is speed to market. And when you start relying on the same design team and you start compressing the schedule, you start getting burnout. And we're starting to see that with some of our designers. I mean, we are pushing them so hard. It's no longer, design is no longer the linear process. It's more of a horse race. I mean, everyone's out of the gate at the same time. You're relying on all your consultants to do all the work as you believe they should do, and then you're hoping that things get coordinated, and ultimately they don't get coordinated at the tail end, so you got a lot of rework. But it's just a constant push of the design team. I mean, if you take, we rolled out Avid Hotels. We started that design process in January, and we released prototype drawings in September. So 9 months we developed that brand. And that was a team that worked extremely hard, and they were working 14, 16 hours a day. And that's just not a sustainable model long term. But we've got to constantly look at other ways of doing that. You know, what can we do? What are some of the other tools that we're utilizing to achieve speed to market? We've got some pretty neat things that we're starting to do right now, which I think have been paying some pretty positive dividends.
Can you share what some of those?
So some of the things that we're starting to do, and I think most brands are starting to do this too, is we're relying on virtual reality because if you look at the design profession, most designers can see three-dimensionally, and they can understand where, how spaces lay out. They can visualize these things when you're looking in plans, but then when you start putting it in three dimensions, that's where you start, bringing these things to life, and you start working with individuals who really don't have that ability to see things three-dimensionally. So we're starting to utilize virtual reality. In addition to, we've always used foam core, so we build big foam core models, but we're looking for virtual reality to help speed the process up. And then we're also using not yet photorealistic renderings, but pretty close to photorealistic renderings to start taking, when you take a sample of a fabric that's, 2x2 sample, those of us in the design profession can visualize that, but those that are not in the profession can't see that, on a wall or on a piece of furniture. So starting to take that step further and share that with our development partners, share that with our marketing teams, and share that with our internal stakeholders as well as our external stakeholders, that's where we start to see the benefit of virtual reality and photorealistic, renderings to speed the process up. Another thing that we're starting to do is we're using a lot of early adopters. We're starting to get these programs out before they become mandated programs, working with our owners, incentivizing our owners to start projects earlier so we can learn from those projects, and we can pick up that learning at the same time we're finalizing the designs before it actually goes out as a prototype document. So we don't repeat the problems after the facts. We're trying to learn as we go. And that's been a change, because if you really look at the design profession is a linear thought process. It's not what we refer to now, and where we've adopted agile project management. So we're starting to break things up, but intuitively, we as designers and architects understand how things go when, for example, when we say it's 16 weeks or 18 weeks for a chair from concept to completion, we all understand that, but having to break that down and get people to start explaining each step that takes place provides a bit of clarity and transparency to those that don't understand it. But it also, after you go through the painful exercise a couple of times, then you start to understand that it's actually making the process faster. And then you start figuring out when you have to get people in for the right approval process, as opposed to waiting at the very end, so you bring them in early, and then you continue to build upon that. So those are just some of the things that we're starting to utilize and have been for a while now.
The virtual reality thing is actually interesting. This is not my space at all. This is more what you guys do. But we were involved in a project recently where external lighting, like streetscape lighting, via virtual reality. It's always been an issue trying to figure out the impact on lighting, like on a streetscape, and how it affects other buildings and signage and stuff. And again, this is not my area at all, but it was utilized to like fully judge how the light was going to impact various corners of the street and the uplights, and it's, again, not my space, but it was pretty cool how it was done.
BIM. We use BIM. BIM is a very powerful tool. What we found like 10 years ago, nobody really wanted to use BIM because construction is a very, very conservative industry. So over the years, it's starting to filter into the, well, from a design standpoint, from a contractor standpoint, of course. But the tool is so powerful, and you add into that 3D modeling, 4D, 5D modeling, 6D and 7D modeling for maintenance. You can look at a complete design and construction process very efficiently. BIM is not meant for the guy that's going to turn up in a white van and doing a kitchen extension, but it's certainly a good platform for everybody to integrate. And a lot of you guys in the audience here, your products can form a big part of that BIM model, because not only can you design through BIM, you can virtually build through BIM, and then you can select your products through BIM. So you can actually place orders through BIM. So we're finding that if you can bring the technology together, along with project management platforms, I'm not sure if you use a platform, but we, like Procure, I'm sure there's a few contractors out here that use Procure. That's an example of a project management delivery system that allows everybody to talk into. And with email today, I don't know about everybody else, but I hate email. So allowing a central project management platform where everybody can talk into, everybody can track the RFIs, everybody can track the submittals. So it eliminates a lot of lost time with email. It eliminates a lot of lost time with poor communication. So BIM, complemented with a central project management system, is a good way for our industry to go.
So just a question for the audience, show of hands, how many of you guys are utilizing BIM or Revit?
That's a fair few, isn't it?
Yeah.
Did you know he gets a commission?
He does.
We both do.
Michael, you do a lot of adaptive reuse in your projects. Talk to me about to us about some of the challenges you're seeing, perhaps on the design side of that.
Sure. Obviously construction costs are right at an all-time high, so that's certainly an issue. You always run into like historical preservation societies. That's definitely something that adaptive reuse has a challenge with. You're taking over buildings that necessarily weren't meant to be hotels, and you're trying to create a hotel from that, whether it's a warehouse, whether it's a bank. And so from a design standpoint, it's actually, can be an opportunity as well as a challenge, right? Is you are creating spaces out of something that wasn't meant to be what you were creating it for. And so a designer's eye can see that as a huge opportunity and do something very special with it, which is what we enjoy as operators, right? We would love to do adaptive reuse all day long, because the thing that we struggle with is trying to find a story, right? And if there's a story, it gives us the opportunity to tell everyone in the world about it, right? And it gives the property, the hotel, a bit of a soul to have a platform to go out and market itself. And so, the great thing about an adaptive reuse project is a designer can come in and create the space that they want with already unique attributes that are incorporated in the project. So, the challenges are, significant when you run into unexpected speed bumps, right? So you whether it's underneath the building, whether it's inside the building, there's always going to be something unexpected that's going to happen that's going to slow down the construction. But you plan for that. But again, a lot of the opportunity is the speed that you can do at adaptive reuse projects. So versus a ground up development, usually it's quicker. From an investment standpoint, they are usually geared to provide cash flow a lot faster. There is, a lot of times a heavy community support. So the flip of the Preservation Society is the community support if you're in a secondary or tertiary city, meaning, it's going to create jobs, it's going to create a new center of gravity. The town or the city is going to get behind it because it's potentially revitalizing a building that was blighted or is in a part of town that is, in need of some enhancement. So we see it as, we've done 6 in the last 18 months, 20 months. We've opened 6 adaptive reuse properties. And we see it as a tremendous way to repurpose buildings, as well as, tax credits are probably the #1 reason that people do them, I would think, from an investment standpoint. And, we in Nashville, we did Fairlane, and underneath the building, they found a time capsule, right? It's crazy. They found a time capsule that, it used to be a bank, and in late 50s, early 60s, they made a video of them stuffing the drawings of the building into a time capsule and put it underneath the building. And so we discovered this while we're in construction. And now we utilize that time capsule, the video, and we put it on the wall of the lobby, and it spins on a loop. So you can see what the building looked like in early 1960s, late 1950s, and the people that were a part of opening that project, right? It's just, you can't create that out of thin air, right? That is a story that we run with. And we're doing a project in Asheville, North Carolina, that built the steel for the Biltmore Mansion. And so that's why it's called the Foundry. And so we found, an elevator that, has been repurposed as a wine cellar. So we didn't, a lot of people would just get rid of it, right? But that has been repurposed as a wine cellar, and people will flock and go down to the wine cellar just to see the old elevator, right? It's little things like that that give you pieces to run with.
You brought some slides, correct?
Yes, not of like the elevator. I think we just brought some slides.
Some of your projects?
Yes, absolutely.
Can we get those on the screen?
So that was an old Holiday Inn. So that was actually just a repurposed, the one in Provincetown. But then all the other ones I think we sent were adaptive reuse. That's the Bristol Hotel. So that has a crank elevator that we took over, and you can actually go in and crank. You're not riding on it, but you can go in and crank. A guest can go in and crank the elevator shaft. Or crank the elevator. It just makes for a great selfie opportunity. I mean, it's that kind of stuff really engages the guest. It's an authentic, curated experience. The Claremont in Atlanta. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Claremont, but I mean, we can talk about that place for
show
forever.
of hands, who knows the Claremont? Okay.
There's hands that go up super high. There's hands that go up super high. But yeah, there's like, you know, the restaurant there is called Tiny Lou's. This was a complete repurposed building set Blythe for years in a bad neighborhood. The restaurant was Tiny Lou's. There's a lounge in the basement that is famous. And one of the dancers in that lounge is famous. Her name is Tiny Lou. She refused to dance for Hitler. That's the story in Atlanta. The restaurant's named Tiny Lou's. This is the Fairlane. That's the bank building in Nashville that I was telling you about. And Spectator Hotel in Charleston was another one, which won the #1 hotel in the country and #2 in the world 2 years ago. Travel and Leisure. And that was it.
Great, thank you. So we've talked about the challenges and some of the opportunities and some of the things we're doing to mitigate those challenges in the early stages, design, prior to getting on site and building. What are the challenges you're seeing or opportunities? We know there's a shortage of labor out there once you're out there building. What are some of the opportunities you're seeing?
Once you're up and under construction?
Yeah, potentially. Or what systems are you using to mitigate that?
Well, nothing ever goes as planned,
Right.
ever. And really just depending on what part of the country you're in, it could be anything from hurricanes to strikes to labor to, so you really just have to build that in, right? And talking about adaptive reuse and speed to market, my experience with anything that involves a public component, it always takes longer because they don't move and they're not motivated by quarterly earnings, or they move in election cycles, right? So you could have everything lined up, but then a city council person is replaced or something happens and basically it could be delayed a year, and costs don't go down, they go up. So what you just have to do is adjust, adapt on the fly, and figure out better ways to do things as you go, right? And as you said, it's not a linear thing anymore. It's what did you call it? Creative or agile project management. Yeah, I like that. I'm going to use that now. Do I have to pay you for that? No.
Okay. Buy me a drink.
All right, done.
I don't want to take over the questions, but as a question for you, as a group that is so large as yours, how do you decide what projects to take, because the volume has to be tremendous to a group like you guys, right? So how do you even siphon through what's real? Because we struggle with it and we're nowhere near, right, your size. So just the sheer volume of what could actually get done and what is just potential.
That's an excellent question, and that's something I'm actually still getting my arms around. I started in March, but I've been doing this for about 30 years. And part of it is just learning what to say no to, because everybody, especially if you're in sales and development, it's like, of course we can do that. We can do this, we can do that. And you just want to put it all in your pipeline and say you can do it. But then what we really need to be doing is saying, you know what, we don't add a lot of value here, or I don't think that will get financed, or that one's a little bit too much of a struggle, doesn't really fit us that well, right? Because we don't have any hotels that were #1, right? Because we're unfortunately more about volume. How do we get, if we could be more specific and say, you know what, this one is better than that one, let's just not do that one, and then this one will be better. Mm-hmm. So that's a long way of saying we're still working on it. It's a good question.
I think part of your question was, how do we overcome some of the obstacles?
Yes.
Right? So if you look at the industry, especially the construction industry, it has not changed in terms of project delivery for the last 50 years. Would you agree, Dave?
I'd agree completely.
And we're very conservative in our methods. So we have to overcome this and to really get our projects done quicker. So if we look at the markets, some of the markets that we build in the union market. So citizenM, we prefer to build modular if we can, but some union markets you can't. Why? Because the unions they frown upon it and they put obstacles in your way. So we typically have to go traditional build. So we have a little clip in a minute, which we'll show in a second here about modular construction. But some of the markets as well, like New York City, that used to be predominantly a union environment. Now the unions are starting to lose traction in that market. And we're finding that we can partner up with the unions if we establish the relationships with those unions earlier with our GCs, that we establish a long-term relationship. We can actually get more competitive with the subcontractor trades and also compress the schedule by doing double shifts, meaning that you can do you can start a first shift at like 5 o'clock and finish at 11 or 12 o'clock, and then the second shift at 12 o'clock and finish at 6 o'clock or something like that. And what does that do? You have 2 shifts. You shorten your project schedule by 20% on a new construction project. And also, it has huge social benefits for the trades. The trades that start earlier, they start at 5, they finish at 12, they can go home. They got social interaction with their families and friends. And so they've done their day's work, and they got there's a huge social plus for this type of program. From a scheduling standpoint, if you look at the scheduling today, or in the past anyway, you will get a master scheduler who will put together a schedule, a critical path schedule, which is great, looks fantastic on a piece of paper. But how does that really relate to what actually happens on the site? So we rely on the subcontractor superintendents to tell us how they're going to get materials in, how moving that, how the steel or the concrete deliveries, how does that affect the schedule on a weekly basis? So you really integrate the true brains of what's happening on the site real time, and that really does help the construction process. David, if I can ask David, how do you see
Answer some emails.
how do you see construction process performing? How can we better improve the performance of a construction project from a JO?
It's really interesting because what you've said is that the competition for talent is incredible. So the demands on schedules have not changed, but the skilled resources to be able to develop those projects, the skill level has decreased, so productivity has become an issue. Owners are not as forgiving as far as schedule. We're really having to re-engineer the overall timeline to be more realistic, because overall compression in the schedule isn't necessarily going to give you a better result from a cost or schedule standpoint. Many times the rush to push work out creates lack of coordination of documents and problems in the field that you pay for. Once you're contracted for the work, you pay for it at a substantially higher rate than you would otherwise if you really took the time, coordinated the documents, and moved forward.
Exactly, and that's why we say start early. Build the teams early so you can create that teamwork at the very beginning, right? And the whole team follows the life cycle through the life of the project.
Well, we're also finding that in many markets, the market is so busy that some of the major contractors that you feel that you could trust are either declining to bid,
yes,
or they're putting in a bid. They can't afford not to put in a bid, so they put in a high bid and hope they're not going to be selected. But if they are, they're going to be really darn profitable.
yes.
So, and they'll figure it out. So that is our biggest challenge, is resources on the design and engineering side, as well as on the construction side.
We're also finding, I'll keep quiet after this.
No, please.
We're also finding that the construction industry, if we're lean in terms of our project delivery process, and also if you look at the contracts these days. The contracts are so, well, they were anyway, and still are to a large part, very controversial. So you always get the contractor, a construction contract, then you have a design contract, and the contracts are just built so everybody is there to protect themselves. Break away the walls within the contracts. Look at what owners did a few years ago. We can influence safety. We can influence how to the project delivery method, like design build or something like that, and we can also influence penalties, for sure, for late delivery, but also incentives for early delivery. So if you break down those walls when it comes into from a design and construction standpoint, and really make the team click and the team synergy really what makes the projects work and work efficiently.
I think one other aspect to add to this is we've talked about the designers, we've talked about the contractors, but we also have to talk about the vendors. And I know you guys out here in the audience are spread so completely thin because the market is on fire, and we all use a lot of the same products, a lot of the same vendors, but we're also finding that vendors can't meet some of the delivery times because those delivery times are often accelerated timelines because of someone who's delayed something in the process that then puts the push on you guys to deliver the product faster. So, we've got to think about better ways of doing that. And I think, Nick, to your point, if you bring everyone to the party at the beginning and you follow that life cycle, then they sort of have a general understanding of the things that are changing. So keeping the vendors abreast of the changes that are taking place in the field only helps the process, so we're not getting a project finished and waiting on a delivery that doesn't show up for another 3 or 4 weeks, 5 weeks, because no one told the vendor we were moving faster. So we got to keep that in mind. And
that's why I think a lot of us will establish long-term relationships with vendors, and there's certainly a few people I'm going to talk to this next couple of days, is establishing those relationships so they understand our specifications. So when we have a project, or when we forecast a project, we can say, hey, we've got this project coming up in 12 months' time. We're ready. Mm-hmm. So, and modular construction is also another way of increasing productivity, especially speed to market. As I said, we typically like to build modular first. That's our preferred method of construction. And then in markets where we can't do modular, we'll go to traditional construction methods. So from a modular standpoint, you do save time, you do save cost if it's done right. It's not easy. You have to be very structured. You have to be very structured and sensible with the approach. We got a bit of a clip here that will show a modular construction in London by the Tower of London. It's only about a minute long, but it will show that we actually built that. The modules were delivered to the site and stacked within 4 weeks, which is absolutely tremendous. And it shaved off probably about 3 months off of the entire construction project. Can you just roll that? Each of those big boxes contained 2 rooms and a corridor. They were plug and play. So everything was completed. The quality was superb, and that just helped the speed of the project. It was immense. We're now building another project in South Lake, Seattle, your neck of the woods.
Yep.
So we're going to experience exactly the same.
So, play devil's advocate here, and hopefully the outcome is good, but I mean, what was the delta on a project schedule using that technology?
3 months.
3 months.
Yeah.
Okay. And what, beautiful technology, a lot of buzz about it, but what are the pitfalls? What are the potential challenges? Whether it be, you said the union market in New York?
Yeah, union market. Some markets like Boston will never accept modular construction. New York used to be like that, but it's now become more. The union markets are starting to realize that they're losing gain in the market, so they have to be open to different methods of construction.
And the units are fabricated where? For the national projects?
Actually, Vanessa is here. We use the same company called Polcon out of Poland. So they're a company. There's other companies around, and there's a discussion on modular construction tomorrow, which would be interesting to listen to.
So how would like tariffs and trade wars come into play if that was?
Oh boy, that's going to be a major. It is a major question with us right now, especially if you're looking at modular fabricators in China, for example.
Sure.
Yeah, you can get a very good quality modular unit built, exceptional quality, a very low price, a competitive price. As soon as you start adding up the tariffs, it throws a big spanner in the works. Now
Sure.
It becomes questionable. Should we do traditional or should we do modular? It's something that we're actually discussing right now in terms of what's going to be most efficient.
But I think one of the challenges that we see with modular is great when it's actually designed for that product. You've got to get a really qualified design firm that really understands it, because there's so much coordination that takes place in the beginning, and you've got to really understand the
Yes.
contractor that plugs into it. So all the consultants have to talk together, all the contractors have to talk together, and
They have to be qualified.
Qualification is a key word, but you really have to make sure that you get that, because otherwise it could be a fiasco when things don't actually work out. I mean, we've done some modular work that's been pretty successful, but we've also had learning challenges along the way. Slab depressions we bought. We did the Intercon out in LA, and we had prefabricated bathroom units that came in. Contractor didn't put the appropriate recess in the slab for those to come in, so then you had to figure out, you've got these bathrooms that are finished sitting on a concrete slab that was supposed to be recessed. How do you feather the concrete in to get the appropriate ramping up into the bathroom unit? So a tremendous amount of coordination has to take place. So again, back to the qualifications, good qualified design firms and consultants, good qualified contractors that really understand it, because it's new to the contractors as well.
Right.
But if you in markets where you can't do modular, there's different ways of skinning a cat, right? So you can do prefab, large section of the building that can be prefab and brought to the construction site. Mm-hmm. Prefab meaning you prefab like the cable trays or something off site and bring it to the site. You plug and play. So it's quick.
How high can you stack the modules? How many floors?
If it's a stick built, I think you're limited to like 6 floors. I think. But if it's a steel built, you can go as north of 20 floors, stories. Yeah.
And how about challenges with the various jurisdictions across the U.S. with the technology?
In Europe or
No, here in the U.S.
Again, it comes down to the markets are pretty much open to modular. Like Miami, we're building 3 right there. My preferred method of construction was modular. They will actually allow us to do modular, but there's certain tests that you used to have to get through, like the impact testing, missile testing for hurricanes. So you have to go through those types of tests before they will allow us to build modular construction. So I can't put a time frame on that. So that's just an example that on paper, yeah, I can build it, and I can build it a lot quicker and a lot more efficiently. But you got the approval process with the city, and that could take a year.
Sure. Questions from the audience?
There was just an article on building design and construction that the citizenM in Bowery is the tallest modular construction, 21 stories.
Yes.
So I had a question on that. Does building behave differently under stress, under high wind, earthquake? Does it, when you're snapping the modules together like that, how over time does it act differently from like a steel or concrete building? Like if you were building in LA, what do you have to do differently?
Oh, you have to.
It's all in the platform.
Yeah,
it's all in the foundation.
You have to have the right.
They still have to meet local jurisdictional codes.
Yeah,
no
like
matter what you
seismic
do.
and stuff, right?
Yeah, you still got to meet the same codes, and there's ways to work around that.
To design that in.
Yeah.
And that's where you got to rely on the local markets to figure out the local,
how it works,
like the seismic conditions and codes and stuff like that. I think that's a question. So.
This might take more than a minute, but the question I'd like to follow up on that Michael Tall asked about tariffs. Obviously, going to go forward is, how's it going to be impacting your schedules and or your projects, and what's your plans?
Yes.
As we all look to you.
You can't put a number on it. That's our biggest challenge. You just cannot put a number on it. It could be anything from 5% to 25%. So when you're talking about like a major modular construction stuff, these boxes are not cheap. So it can have an impact of millions. And
So furniture is a big, right? China, furniture for depending on what scale of hotel you're building. That is a huge. But we're an operator, right? We're not necessarily a developer, but it's going to impact our projects. There's no question. Just the volume. Pardon me?
Sure.
Yep, absolutely.
So the question really is bigger. How does that impact all of our schedules as far as projects that are like
So from our perspective, what we're looking at is we're already getting indications from our suppliers that products are going to be, the tariffs are going to start being levied on these products. We're beginning to look at our manufacturers and our suppliers to go out to markets other than China, and also some domestic markets to see what we can do to help trim those costs down. We've spent a tremendous amount of time and effort over the past several years trying to find suppliers who really understood our market and then being able to leverage that scale across our other brands to keep driving that down. But the relationship, as Nick said, with our vendors that we have, they're coming to us and letting us know what they see coming down the pike with regard to tariffs. And then they're also telling us they're beginning to shift their production over to some other factories to eliminate or avoid those tariffs. We're continuing to do that with all of our suppliers.
Just a couple more questions down there.
Yeah, I'm hoping that we can, if you guys could elaborate a little more on the IT side. We're using BIM, Revit now on a couple of projects, on all of our projects really, and we see it as the future. But there's still some folks that aren't prepared to do that. I know we can integrate renderings into the Revit model. We're trying to do that on a project right now. The suppliers aren't necessarily all have BIM models that can be dropped in yet. And just where are we at with the cycle of everything going into the Revit BIM? Are we halfway there, a third of the way there?
In my opinion, from the brand's perspective, I think we're probably a third of the way there. We're building Revit models, and we're also taking those Revit models and we're building the furniture components within the Revit models, and we're giving all that information to a franchisee. So unfortunately for the design profession, they're not having to recreate things, which we're getting a little bit of pushback from the design community, but most of our mainstream brands are mandated designs. So we're sending the files directly to them, so they can actually drop stuff in. They can take it and run with it. So it gives the owner a jump start in the design process. We're not starting from scratch. But a lot of design firms these days are really not embracing Revit because they're still working in the ways of AutoCAD, two-dimensional drafting. Because it takes a specialized talent to really do the coordination. And when I talked about earlier, you've got that segment of the design profession that went off to different markets and different fields that they're not there. The younger staff is really embracing it and they understand how to navigate the system, but they don't really understand the coordination. They don't understand that, theoretically it works in the computer, but you have to build the tolerances in the field. They don't really understand that. And then the older generation really understands coordination, but we all want to go back to let's lay it out on paper, let's do it the old way we've done it, just to make sure it really works.
Are you in that category, Dave?
Pardon me?
Are you in that category?
I'm definitely in that category. Definitely. But we're trying to help our owners out as we move forward because again, it's speed to market. What we're trying to explain to our owners is the quicker your project gets completed and you get heads on beds is when you start generating that revenue, whether it's new revenue or incremental revenue. You stop your financing, you convert over to, you convert to permanent financing. I mean, there's lots of reasons why we should do that. And just getting everybody on board. But I think it takes the whole community, from the designers to the suppliers to the contractors to the owners, to really think about things a little bit differently than we did 15 years ago. That's sort of my take on it.
We have time for one more question down over here. Tim.
Hello, my name is Tim Levine. We have also worked with Modular, and where I'm going with this is it goes back into the construction side of it. We've all seen the denigration over the last 10 years of the capacity or craftsmanship quality of people and their availability. Nick, you're British, I'm Australian. We both grew up in countries where the education system streamed us at a certain point between either a professional high school or a technical school.
Yes.
What my question goes to is, hotels are going to continue. They're going to be built forever and ever and ever. We all talk about these cycles, we keep building them. Have we as an industry ever thought about the idea of promulgating how to get back into that system where we can actually start to train people in the industry, as opposed to, I turn up at the job site, I have a hammer in my hand, so therefore I must be a carpenter. Or tomorrow I've got a pair of pliers, so therefore I'm an electrician. The benefit we have of modular is that we're actually using people who are non-trained in the construction industry, because we're basically building a dishwasher. Put this piece of wire here, put that piece of metal there. How can we put those two things together? The long-term training, and this is not something that's going to happen overnight, and it certainly doesn't affect our 90-day cycle. But how do we look at those sorts of things so that maybe 5 years from now we have a whole new paradigm in terms of who and what is available to build our buildings?
We're all seasoned professionals here, extremely successful, everybody in this room. And we have an obligation, because we're so successful, to send the elevator down so that our younger folks, our younger generations, can then train and succeed. I'm clearly qualifications and going to college and getting their degrees and stuff is very, very important. But I think there's a huge benefit to sending some of the folks out on construction sites, not necessarily swinging hammers as I started, but learning the tricks of the trade, understanding how the construction companies work, how the subcontractors work, how they communicate, how they build stuff. That knowledge is absolutely golden. So that's one part of it. For construction methods like modular is another way, as you say, of improving our productivity. Haven't quite figured out, haven't quite got an answer to that, but certainly putting people out, putting our younger generations out on the field earlier in the project so they can get to see how
how it's done, right?
Yeah, works.
And the other aspect of that too is from the brand's perspective, when we have prototype documents, we always reach back out to our owners and ask our owners, how did we do? Are we giving you the product, the information you need? Where can we improve upon that? Where are we screwing up? So helping, getting that value add and that connection back to the owners. So you're you're working together as a team, and it's not, the brands are sending this information out and you guys are supposed to then figure out how to utilize that. We're trying to work more closely together to create that value and that partnership with our ownership community.
So I want to thank you guys for a very engaging discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.